I stood in the cellar, hands trembling as I lifted the metal box. 263 letters. Every single envelope bore the same red stamp. Return to sender. Address unknown. My grandmother had tried to reach me 263 times. Every week for the first 5 years, then monthly for 13 more. 18 years total. All of them sent back. Not one made it to my hands. I understood now why the addresses never worked, why every attempt had been blocked. But before I could explain what I found in that darkness beneath the Montana earth, I needed to go back. Back to the day I turned 18 and believed with absolute certainty that I was completely alone in this world. The last morning at Riverside Group Home smelled like industrial floor cleaner and bureaucracy. 18 years old. The state called it aging out. I called it being shoved off a cliff with a handshake and a pamphlet about community resources. Lily sat beside me in the director's office, clutching the same threadbare bear she'd arrived with 10 years ago. She was 16, and because some razor-thin margin of paperwork now made me her legal guardian, they were releasing her too. Her freedom hinged entirely on mine, which felt less like a gift and more like another weight I had no idea how to carry. Mr. Henderson slid a manila envelope across his desk. Everything you need is in here. Birth certificates, social security cards, a list of shelters and job placement services. His voice had that practiced neutrality that came from years of delivering the same speech to kids who had nowhere to go. He tapped a smaller, cream-colored envelope resting on top. This arrived last week from a law firm. It pertains to your grandmother's estate. The word grandmother felt foreign in my mouth. She existed only as a ghost in my memory. A faint scent of cinnamon, the outline of a smiling face in a photograph I'd lost years ago. The official story was simple. She'd dropped us at state intake when I was 6 and Lily was 4, then disappeared. I'd spent 12 years nursing a cold knot of resentment toward her. Anger was easier than grief. Estate? My voice came out rough. I hadn't planned to speak. Mr. Henderson's eyes flicked toward the clock. Apparently she passed away some months ago. There was property, a ranch, I believe. The attorneys have been trying to locate you. Lily's head snapped up, hope flooding her face. A ranch? I didn't let myself feel it. Hope was a currency we couldn't afford in our world. It bought nothing but disappointment. And? I kept my tone flat. Henderson coughed, already standing to signal the meeting's end. That's for the lawyers to discuss. Their information is in the packet. They're expecting your call. We were escorted to the front door, the same entrance we'd been carried through as terrified children. A social worker pressed a debit card into my palm. $500. The state's parting gift. A final handshake. The heavy door clicked shut behind us. The city noise hit like a wave. We stood on the sidewalk with one duffel bag each, filled with clothes that never quite fit, and a handful of belongings that felt borrowed from someone else's life. And we had that cream envelope that might contain a home, or just another dead end. Lily looked up at me, face pale. What do we do? I stared at the envelope, then at her. For the first time, the knot in my chest wasn't anger. It was fear. Pure, paralyzing fear. I was 18 years old, responsible for my sister's entire world, and I had no idea which direction was up. The law office of Harrison and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower downtown. The building reflected gray sky, and people in expensive suits moved with purpose that felt alien. The receptionist's polite smile didn't reach her eyes as she took in our worn clothes and nervous stance. But the name on the envelope got us through the door and into a quiet conference room overlooking the sprawling city below. Mr. Harrison was older than I expected, late 60s maybe, with sharp eyes behind thick glasses and a calm demeanor. No pity in his gaze. I was grateful for that. He treated us like clients, not charity cases. He opened a leather folder and got straight to business. Ember, Lily, thank you for coming in. I was your grandmother's attorney, Margaret Bennett. She passed away 8 months ago from cancer. 8 months. The timeline hit me wrong. I'd assumed she'd been dead for years. The idea that she'd been alive until recently, that she'd existed somewhere in the world while I'd been learning to hate her, felt disorienting. As Mr. Henderson mentioned, your grandmother left you her property, a 40-acre ranch in Havenwood, Montana, about 4 hours north of Billings. 40 acres. The word sounded impossibly large, like a kingdom. Harrison raised a hand before Lily could react. Before you get excited, we need to be very clear about the situation. The property is heavily encumbered. I didn't know what encumbered meant, but I knew it wasn't good. He slid a thick folder across the polished table. Your grandmother took out a significant mortgage on the ranch several years before she disappeared. She also fell behind on property taxes. The total debt currently stands at $112,000. The air left the room. The number was so enormous it felt abstract. A mountain. Lily's face fell, the brief spark of hope extinguished. I tasted something bitter and familiar. Of course, the world didn't just hand you things. Furthermore, Harrison continued in that same level tone. The bank holding the mortgage has initiated foreclosure proceedings. A development company, Sterling Development, has been trying to acquire the land for years. They've made a formal offer to purchase the estate. He pushed another paper toward us. An offer letter. They're offering $120,000. I did the math instantly. Pay the debt, we'd have $8,000 left, minus legal fees and probate costs, maybe $5,000 remaining. Enough to rent a cheap apartment for a few months before we ended up right back where we started. A slightly more comfortable cliff, same fall. So we sell. My voice came out flat, not a question. That is the simplest option. Harrison's expression didn't change. It would clear the debts and give you a small amount of starting capital. A clean break. The phrase echoed in my head. Clean break. That's what they'd said about our grandmother, too. What's the alternative? Lily's voice was small but steady. First time she'd spoken to Harrison directly. He looked at her, something that might have been respect flickering in his eyes. The alternative is you take possession of the ranch. You would have 90 days to pay the outstanding mortgage and taxes in full. If you can't, the bank forecloses, the property gets auctioned, and you'd likely receive nothing. Sterling Development would almost certainly be the buyer at auction. It wasn't a choice. It was a sick joke. Pay $112,000 in 90 days. We had 500. We'll sell. I said it firmer this time, looking at Lily, trying to communicate the harsh reality with my eyes. This was the only rational path forward. Harrison nodded slowly. I understand. However, your grandmother left very specific instructions in her will. She stipulated that you both must visit the property before making any decision. It's a non-negotiable clause. You have to physically go there and see it for yourselves. He paused, opened his desk drawer, and pulled out a small tarnished silver key. It was old, ornate, nothing like the modern keys on my facility key ring. A folded hand-drawn map came with it. The key is to the storm cellar. The map will get you there from the bus station in Havenwood. I've already purchased your tickets for tomorrow morning. He slid both items across the desk. Think of it as your grandmother's last request. The whole thing felt like a cruel game. A forced pilgrimage to witness the thing we could never have. But the will was the will. We were trapped. That night we stayed in a motel near the bus station. $45 for a room that reeked of stale smoke and industrial bleach. The $500 was already dwindling. Lily cried herself to sleep, shoulders shaking silently in the bed next to mine. I lay awake staring at water stains on the ceiling, the silver key cold in my palm. I hated my grandmother. Hated her for this elaborate, painful gesture, for dangling a home in front of us only to snatch it away, for making us perform this final act in a tragedy she'd written. I didn't know yet that the story I'd been telling myself was completely wrong, that the key in my hand wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. The bus ride bled gray city into green country. For the first hour, Lily and I sat in silence, watching familiar concrete and steel give way to suburbs, then strip malls, then wide open fields. The bus was old, seats worn smooth, and the rhythmic thump of tires on asphalt became the only sound between us. I kept replaying Harrison's words. 112,000. 90 days. The numbers were impossible. Selling was the only logical move. Take the few $1,000s and try to build something resembling a life. Get it over with. But as the miles rolled past, something shifted inside me. The endless green was startling. I'd spent my entire existence surrounded by buildings and fences and walls. Out here, the sky was huge. A vast, pale blue canvas that seemed to go on forever. Trees weren't neatly planted in sidewalk squares. They grew wild and chaotic in dense forests that looked ancient and imposing. It was beautiful. It was also terrifying. A world that operated on rules I didn't understand. Lily had her face pressed against the glass, breath fogging a small circle on the window. She hadn't said a word since we left Portland. You okay? She didn't turn. Why did she make us do this? Why make us see it when we can't keep it? Her voice carried grief too big for her small frame. I don't know. Maybe she didn't realize how bad things would get. The excuse felt thin even as I said it. Or maybe she just didn't care. Lily's whisper cut. The words stung because they'd been echoing in my own mind for years. We were the children who'd been left behind, unwanted. That was our foundation. After 18 hours, the bus hissed to a stop in Havenwood. The station was just a peeling bench outside a general store that looked frozen in the 1970s. The air smelled different here. Clean, earthy, damp soil and pine needles. The city's perpetual hum was gone, replaced by birds chirping and wind rustling through trees. The quiet felt loud. We were the only passengers getting off. The driver gave us a curious look before closing the doors and pulling away in a cloud of diesel fumes. We stood on the roadside with our 2 duffel bags, feeling like we'd been dropped on a different planet. I pulled out the hand-drawn map, faded ink on brittle, yellowed paper. It showed the main road, a turnoff onto a smaller dirt path called Miller's Lane, then a winding route marked with an X, Vance Ranch, written in my grandmother's same looping script. The map noted 3 miles from town. 3 miles felt like 100. We walk? Lily asked, voice small. Looks like it. I tried to sound more confident than I felt, slinging my bag over my shoulder. Come on. The sooner we get there, the sooner we can leave. The walk stretched long. Sun beat down. Asphalt gave way quickly to packed dirt and gravel on Miller's Lane. No sidewalks here. just overgrown weeds and wildflowers lining the path. We passed a few houses set far back from the road, long driveways, sleepy dogs that lifted their heads to watch us pass. Nobody was outside. The whole town felt deserted. After what felt like forever, we saw it. A rusted wrought iron gate hanging crooked on one hinge. A simple wooden sign, weathered to pale gray, was nailed to a post beside it. The letters were faded, but I could make them out. Bennett Ranch, established 1952. We stepped through the gate. The driveway was more suggestion than road. 2 tire ruts overgrown with weeds that scraped our legs. It wound through a grove of tall, whispering pines before opening into a clearing. There it was. The ranch. My chest tightened. The house was a simple 1-story wooden structure, paint peeling in long, curling strips, white with a blue roof. Or it had been once. Now both colors were faded, sun-bleached ghosts of their former selves. The porch roof sagged dramatically in the middle, looking ready to collapse. Windows were clouded with grime. One was boarded up with plywood. The land around it wasn't a neat pasture. It was a wild meadow of waist-high grass and thorny bushes. To one side, a large barn stood listing left, its big doors hanging open like a gaping mouth. Red paint had faded to rust. It looked abandoned, forgotten. It looked exactly how I felt. Lily stopped, hand flying to her mouth. I expected tears. Expected her to voice disappointment. Instead, she whispered, "It's real." I looked at her, then back at the dilapidated structure. She was right. As broken as it was real. Wood and nails and glass. A place. Our place. The thought was terrifying. We walked up the creaking wooden steps, carefully avoiding the sagging middle section. I pulled out the silver key. It felt ancient in my hand, heavy with history I didn't understand. But when I tried the door, it wasn't locked. Just stuck, swollen, shut from years of dampness and disuse. I had to jiggle the knob and push hard with my shoulder. Something inside gave way with a groan, and the door swung inward into darkness. Cool, musty air washed over us, the smell of dust and time, and a house that had been holding its breath for 12 years. Sunlight streamed through dirty windows, illuminating swirling dust motes in thick golden shafts. Furniture was still here, shrouded in white cloths like a room full of ghosts. A sofa, armchairs, a stone fireplace filled with old ash. We stepped inside. The door swung shut behind us with a soft click, plunging everything into shadow. For a long moment we just stood there, letting our eyes adjust. This was it. The place we came from. The place that had been waiting for us all along. The house was a time capsule. As we moved from room to room, pulling dust cloths off furniture, it felt like walking through someone else's frozen memories. The sofa had faded floral patterns. The dining table was set for 4, as if our grandmother had just stepped out for a moment. In the kitchen, a calendar hung on the wall, still turned to August 2012. 12 years ago. A coffee cup sat by the sink. Life interrupted. Lily drifted through like a ghost herself, fingers tracing furniture outlines, running over book spines on a dusty shelf. I was more methodical, mind still fixed on the practical problem. We were here to fulfill a legal obligation. Look at the property, then call Harrison and authorize the sale. But the house was working its magic on me. A slow, creeping sense of belonging I tried to fight. I found the main bedroom. Simple. A large, unmade bed, Tall wooden wardrobe, dressing table with a dusty oval mirror. On the table sat a collection of ordinary things: a silver-backed hairbrush, a small perfume bottle, and a framed photograph. I picked it up, wiping dust away with my thumb. A woman with a kind, smiling face. Same looping, joyful energy as the handwriting on the map. She was holding two small children in her arms. A little girl with serious eyes. A tiny girl with wild, dark hair. It was us. I didn't remember the photo being taken. Didn't remember the woman's arms around me. But looking at it, I felt something. A phantom limb of memory. This was Margaret Bennett, our grandmother. I studied her face in the dim light, and then I looked at my own reflection in the dusty mirror beside the frame. We had the same eyes, exactly the same. "Ember, look," Lily called from the hallway. I put the photo down and followed her voice. She was standing in front of a small door I hadn't noticed, tucked under what would have been a staircase if this were a two-story house. Made of thick, dark wood with a heavy iron ring for a handle. The cellar. I pulled on the ring. It didn't budge. I pulled harder, feet sliding on dusty floorboards. Stuck fast, swollen shut from a decade of dampness and disuse. It's no use. I was breathing heavily. It's warped. We have to get in. Lily's voice had that strange, urgent certainty again. There might be things down there. Tools. Something. Something in her tone made me pause. I went back to the folder Harrison had given me, which I dropped on the dining table. Rifled through the dense pages of legalese. Tucked into a side pocket was a separate, smaller envelope. Not from the law firm. Same cream-colored paper as the one Mr. Henderson had given us. Same looping handwriting. My name on the front. I tore it open. The note was short. "Ember, if you're reading this, you've made it home. I'm sorry for the state it's in. I'm sorry for so much. Don't sell. Not yet. Everything you need to understand is in the storm cellar. The key isn't for the lock on the door. It's for the storm. Love, Grandma." The storm? Lily read over my shoulder. I looked from the note to the cellar door, then back to the silver key still in my pocket. The key isn't for the lock on the door. The front door hadn't needed the key. It was unlocked. I just assumed the key was for the house. But what if it wasn't? We went back to the cellar door. No keyhole, just the iron ring. We looked for another way in, circling outside the house. Around back, half hidden by overgrown lilac bushes, we found it. A pair of slanted wooden doors set into the ground. A bulkhead entrance. Storm cellar. The kind you saw in old photos of Midwest farms where families took shelter from tornadoes. It was secured by a heavy wooden beam and a large rusty padlock. The padlock had a keyhole that even from a distance looked old and ornate. My heart started pounding. I slid the silver key into the rusty lock. It fit perfectly. With a grating squeal of protest, the lock turned. We lifted the heavy doors, revealing steep stone steps leading down into darkness. Cool, earthy smell rose up, the scent of deep, undisturbed places. We found a flashlight in a kitchen drawer that miraculously still had weak life in its batteries. Its beam cut a thin yellow circle through the oppressive dark. I went first, Lily close behind, her hand gripping the back of my jacket. The stone steps were slick with damp. The cellar was larger than I expected. The stone foundation of the house forming a wide, low-ceiling room. It was filled with the clutter of a lifetime. Old canning jars, broken furniture, stacks of newspapers tied with twine. The flashlight beam danced over the mess. Just a junk room. My brief surge of hope began curdling back into disappointment. Another dead end. Another one of my grandmother's cruel games. What are we even looking for? Lily whispered, voice trembling in the dark. The storm. The word felt foolish. My light caught something in the far corner, a low wooden platform, and on top of it, a large dark shape covered by a heavy canvas tarp. It looked different from the rest of the junk, more deliberate. I walked toward it, flashlight beam steady. I pulled back the dusty tarp. Underneath was a heavy, iron-banded footlocker, a seaman's chest. Old, the wood dark and scarred. Sealed with a padlock even bigger and rustier than the one on the outside door. But this one had no keyhole. It's locked. Lily's voice carried frustration. I ran my hands over the chest, looking for a seam, a latch, anything. Nothing. Then my fingers brushed against a small, tarnished brass plaque screwed into the lid. I angled the flashlight to read the words engraved there. In case of storm, break seal. My breath caught. This was it. I looked around the cellar. My eyes landed on a heavy sledgehammer leaning against the stone wall, meant for splitting firewood, but it would do. My hands shook as I picked it up. Heavy, solid. I positioned the head against the rusty hasp of the padlock. Stand back. I swung. The sound of metal on metal was deafening in the enclosed space, a sharp, ringing clang that vibrated up my arms. The lock held. I swung again, harder, putting all my frustration, all my fear, all my years of anger into the blow. A sharp crack. The rusted metal fractured. One more hit and it shattered, falling to the floor with a dull thud. For a moment we just stood there, breathing heavily in the sudden silence, the air thick with rust and dust. Slowly I knelt down and lifted the heavy lid. The flashlight beam fell inside. I wasn't sure what I'd expected. Gold bars, antique jewelry, some mythical treasure. The reality was both more mundane and infinitely more shocking. The chest was filled with bundles of cash, stacks and stacks of $50 and $100 bills wrapped in rubber bands. More money than I'd ever seen in my life. But that wasn't what made me freeze. Lying on top of the money, right in the center, was a large metal box. And inside that box, carefully preserved, were hundreds of envelopes. I lifted the box out with trembling hands. The lid was unlocked. Inside, 263 letters, all addressed to me in the same careful handwriting. Ember Grace Bennett, Riverside Group Home, Portland, Oregon. Every single one had a red stamp. Return to sender, address unknown. My grandmother had tried to reach me. Every week for 5 years, then monthly for 13 more. 18 years of letters, all of them sent back. Not one had reached me. On top of the stack, tied with a faded blue ribbon, was one envelope that simply said, "Read me first." My hands trembled as I untied the ribbon, opened the envelope. The flashlight shook as I held the page, and I began to read my grandmother's words aloud into the darkness. My dearest Ember and Lily, if you are reading this, it means 2 things. First, that I am gone. Second, that despite all my fears, you have found your way home. I know you have questions. I know you have probably spent your lives hating me. I don't blame you. The story you were told, the one about me abandoning you, is the story I needed everyone to believe. It was the only way I could keep you safe. I had to stop. Take a breath. The words felt like a physical blow. Keep us safe? From what? I continued reading, my voice barely a whisper now. The truth is, I never wanted to leave you. You were my whole world. After your parents died, you were all I had left. But this land, This ranch, it's more than just a home. It's been in our family for generations, and there are people who have wanted it for just as long. Not for the house, but for the water rights that come with it. A corporation, a predecessor to the one you're probably dealing with now, tried to force me out years ago. They used threats, intimidation, legal tricks. I fought them. I fought them with everything I had. But then they started watching the house. They took pictures of you playing in the yard. A man stopped me in town one day and described your school bus route to me, Ember. He told me what time you got on, what time you got off. He told me Lily's favorite playground. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a promise. They were telling me that if I didn't give up the ranch, they would take what I loved most. They would take you. Lily made a small, choked sound behind me. I reached back. My hand found hers in the dark. Her fingers were ice cold. I was trapped. If I sold, we'd have nothing and nowhere to go. If I stayed, I was putting your lives in danger every single day. So I came up with a third option, a terrible, desperate plan. I had to disappear. I had to make it look like I had run away, like I was an irresponsible old woman who couldn't handle raising 2 children. I had to become the villain in your story so that the real villains would leave you alone. They wouldn't have any leverage over me if they thought I didn't care about you. So I packed a bag, drove to the city, and left you at the only place I knew would keep you physically safe, even if it broke your hearts. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. It broke my heart, too. When I finished reading, the silence in the cellar was absolute. The weak flashlight beam illuminated tear tracks on Lily's face. She wasn't making a sound, just letting them fall. I felt a strange emptiness inside me, a hollow space where 12 years of anger and resentment had lived. All of it gone, replaced by vast, aching grief. Grief for the woman in the photograph. Grief for the life we could have had. We stayed down in that cellar for a long time. The flashlights slowly dimming, darkness closing in. The money was a physical weight in the chest, a tangible solution to a practical problem. But the letters were heavier. They were an inheritance of a different kind, not of property or wealth, but of truth. And with that truth came a choice. The easy path was still there. Take the money, sell the ranch, walk away clean. But now it felt like betrayal. Betrayal of the woman who had sacrificed everything so we could stand right here in this moment and make this choice. When the flashlight finally died, plunging us into absolute darkness, we sat there in the silence, the letters a physical weight in my lap. I could hear Lily breathing beside me, and I could hear something else, a rustling, like paper moving in a breeze that shouldn't exist down here, like letters that had waited 12 years to finally be read. Morning light filtered through the cellar doors we'd left open. Neither of us had slept. We'd spent the entire night reading letters by the beam of Lily's phone until the battery died, then sat in darkness, holding the envelopes, feeling their weight. My grandmother had written every week for 5 years. 260 letters. Then 3 more marked special in different colored ink. Birthday 18, high school graduation, and 1 marked when you find the truth. I hadn't opened that last one yet. Some part of me wasn't ready. The money sat in neat stacks around us. I'd counted it twice by flashlight. $135,400. More than enough to pay the debt and have something left over. More than enough to walk away. But walking away meant something different now. Lily stirred beside me, face puffy from crying. We should go upstairs, get some sleep. I can't sleep yet. I reached for another letter. one from the middle years. The envelope was worn, like it had been handled many times. October 2017. I would have been 11. The handwriting was shakier than the earlier letters. My dear Ember, I saw you today. Not in person, but I drove past the group home. I know I shouldn't have. I know it's dangerous. But it was your birthday and I couldn't help myself. I parked 2 blocks away and waited. At 3:15, you came out with other children. You were wearing a blue jacket too big for you. Your hair was longer. You looked so much older. You were laughing at something another girl said. The sound carried across the street. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. I wanted to run to you. I wanted to hold you and tell you everything. But I stayed in the car. I stayed hidden. Because keeping you safe means staying away. I drove back to the motel and cried for 2 hours. Then I wrote this letter. Tomorrow I'll mail it, knowing it will come back just like all the others. But I'll keep writing, because someday, somehow, you'll know. You'll know you were never forgotten, not for a single day. Happy birthday, my brave girl. Grandma. The date stamp showed it had been returned within a week. Address unknown. But the address hadn't been unknown. Someone had made sure these letters never reached us. Who changed our address in the system? Lily's voice was hoarse. I don't know. But whoever did it wanted to make sure we never connected with her. They wanted us to believe we were abandoned. Sterling? Maybe. Or someone working for them. I shuffled through more envelopes, looking at the return addresses. They came from all over. Boise, Idaho, Spokane, Washington, Reno, Nevada, Missoula. She'd been moving constantly, never staying in one place long enough to be found. She was running. Lily understood. All those years she was running from them and still trying to reach us, every single week for 5 years. Even knowing the letters would come back. The weight of that devotion pressed down on my chest. My grandmother had put pen to paper, sealed an envelope, paid for postage, and sent her love into a void that sent it right back, over and over, choosing hope over despair. I thought about all the nights I'd lain awake in the group home, angry at her, hating her for leaving us, building walls around my heart so I wouldn't feel the abandonment. All of it based on a lie. We need to go into town. I stood up, legs stiff from sitting all night. I need to understand what happened here, who these people are, why they wanted this land badly enough to destroy a family. Lily looked up at me. What are we going to do? I don't know yet, but we're not selling. Not until I understand what Grandma died protecting. The walk into Havenwood felt different in daylight. The main street was quiet. Just a handful of pickup trucks parked outside a diner called the Whitmore Cafe. A general store with faded red awning, a hardware store, a post office. Everything moved slower here, like time operated on different rules. I pushed open the hardware store door, a bell chiming overhead. The smell of sawdust and motor oil filled the space. Shelves stocked with tools, paint cans, coils of rope. An older man stood behind the counter, maybe late 60s, with silver hair and weathered hands that looked like they'd built half the county. He glanced up, and his expression shifted, froze, stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. Lord above, you look just like Maggie did when she was young. I didn't know what to say. You knew my grandmother? He came around the counter, moving slowly. Knew her? I worked for your family for 40 years. Started when your grandfather was still alive. Help build that barn you've got out there. His voice cracked slightly. I'm Caleb Thornton, and you must be Ember. How did you know my name? Because Maggie talked about you every time I saw her, before she had to leave. And after, when she'd sneak back into town once a year to check on things. He gestured toward the back room. Come on, there's something you should see. The back room was part workshop, part storage. Caleb pulled a cardboard box from a high shelf, set it on a workbench covered in wood shavings. Your grandmother left this with me. 10 years ago, right before she disappeared for good. She said if anything happened to her, and if you ever came looking, I should give it to you. He opened the box. Inside were photographs, documents, newspaper clippings. I pulled out a photo from the top. My grandmother, younger, standing next to a tall man with kind eyes, both smiling. Behind them, the ranch house looked freshly painted. The barn stood straight and proud. Your grandparents, about 1985. Best people I ever knew. I set the photo down carefully and pulled out more papers. A land deed from 1952, water rights documentation, and then something that made my blood run cold. A contract from 1995. Sterling Development Corporation offering to purchase the Bennett Ranch for $40,000. Marked rejected in red ink. They tried to buy it 30 years ago? Caleb nodded grimly. And they've been trying ever since. But it's not really about the land. It's about the water. You've got spring-fed wells on that property. Clean, endless water. In Montana, that's worth more than gold. Sterling wanted to build a resort development. They need massive amounts of water for a golf course, swimming pools, hundreds of units. Your grandparents' land sits right on the aquifer that feeds half the county. I kept digging through the box. Found the newspaper clipping from August 2012. My hands started shaking as I read the headline. Local couple killed in highway accident. The article was brief. James and Lisa Bennett, both in their 30s, died when their vehicle was struck by a semi-truck on Highway 89. Truck driver fled the scene. Investigation ongoing. My parents. I'd known they died in an accident, but seeing the actual article, seeing their names in print, made it devastatingly real. Caleb's voice was gentle. I'm sorry you had to learn about it this way. I kept reading. The article mentioned the truck belonged to Cascade Holdings, LLC. I pulled out another document from the box, one with Sterling Development letterhead from 2010. At the bottom, in small print, a subsidiary of Cascade Holdings. They killed them. The words came out flat, emotionless, because if I let myself feel it, I'd shatter. Sterling killed my parents. I can't prove that. Caleb's jaw tightened, but I've suspected it for 15 years. The driver was never found. The investigation went cold within a month, and the accident happened 2 weeks after your father publicly opposed Sterling's development plans at a county meeting. He pulled out one more document, a police report, but entire sections were blacked out, redacted, and a notation at the bottom. File transferred to State Archives 2014. Current location, unknown. The evidence disappeared. I looked at Caleb. Someone made it disappear. Someone with enough money and influence to make a lot of things disappear. His expression was grim. Your grandmother knew. She couldn't prove it, but she knew. And when they started threatening you girls, she made the hardest choice of her life. The pieces were falling into place, a terrible, sickening picture. She sacrificed everything to protect us from murderers. Caleb put a heavy hand on my shoulder. Maggie was the bravest person I ever knew, and the loneliest. She'd come through town once a year, always at night. I'd meet her at the ranch, help her fix what needed fixing. She'd ask about you girls, if I'd heard anything. I never had, and it broke her heart every time. I pulled out my phone, took pictures of every document in the box. The contract, the newspaper article, the police report. Evidence of a pattern stretching back decades. When I looked up, Caleb was watching me with something that might have been pride. You planning to fight them? I'm planning to understand what I'm up against first. Then I'll decide. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They'll know you're here by now. They've probably known since you arrived. This is a small town. Word travels. Let them know. My voice came out stronger than I felt. I'm not hiding. We walked back to the ranch in the afternoon heat. Lily had stayed behind to clean up the kitchen, trying to make the place livable. As we approached, I saw a black sedan parked in the driveway. Expensive. Mercedes, maybe. The kind of car that didn't belong on a dirt road. A man stood on the porch, examining the sagging roof with the detached interest of someone evaluating property, not home. He wore a suit that probably cost more than everything I owned. Perfectly tailored, steel gray. His dark hair was slicked back, and when he turned to face us, his smile didn't reach his eyes. Ember Bennett. He came down the steps with practiced ease, hand extended. I'm Richard Kane, CEO of Sterling Development. I didn't take his hand. I know who you are. His smile widened slightly, acknowledging the coldness. Good. That saves time. I came to make you an offer. We're not interested. You haven't heard the offer yet. He pulled a folded paper from his inside pocket. $150,000. Cash. We can close within a week. You and your sister walk away with enough money to start fresh somewhere else. College, apartment, whatever you want. No. Kane's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Calculation. Assessment. You do understand the position you're in. You owe $112,000. You have 90 days. Even if you somehow come up with the money, you'll have nothing left. No way to maintain this property, no way to make it productive. You'll lose it eventually anyway. Maybe, but it won't be to you. He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was cold and sharp. Your grandmother said the same thing. Do you know where that got her? The words hung in the air between us like a threat. Careful. Caleb stepped forward. That sounds an awful lot like an admission. Kane glanced at him with contempt. It's a statement of fact. Margaret Bennett was a stubborn woman who made poor choices. She died alone and broke because she refused to accept reality. His gaze shifted back to me. I'd hate to see history repeat itself. Get off my property. This isn't your property. Not really. Not yet. And the way things are going, it never will be. Kane folded the paper and tucked it back into his jacket. You have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, the offer drops to $100,000. It'll keep dropping the longer you wait. In 90 days, when the bank forecloses, we'll buy it at auction for a fraction of what I'm offering now, and you'll get nothing. He walked to his car, paused with his hand on the door. One more thing. Accidents happen out here. Fires, equipment malfunctions, wild animals. It's a dangerous place for two young women with no experience. I'd hate to see you get hurt. The threat was barely veiled. Lily had come to the door, face pale. Are you threatening us? Kane smiled. I'm advising you, there's a difference. He got in the car. 48 hours. The Mercedes kicked up dust as it drove away. Caleb's jaw was tight. You need to be careful. These people don't make idle threats. I know, but I'm not backing down. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my grandmother's bed, staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the house made me jump. The wind rattling windows sounded like footsteps. I kept thinking about Kane's words. Fires, equipment malfunctions, accidents. Around 2 in the morning, Lily's screams shattered the silence. I bolted out of bed, running toward her room. She was at the window, pointing. The barn was on fire. Flames engulfed the old structure, turning night into day. The dry wood burned fast and hot, sending sparks spiraling into the dark sky. By the time I called 911 and we ran outside, the entire barn was an inferno. The volunteer fire department took 20 minutes to arrive. By then, there was nothing to save. We stood in the yard watching it burn. The heat so intense we had to back away. The fire chief, a tired-looking man named Morrison, walked the perimeter with a flashlight. No electrical in the barn? None. It hasn't had power in years. He crouched near what used to be the entrance, studying something on the ground. His flashlight beam caught the glint of glass. Could have been spontaneous combustion. Old hay, heat buildup. Or, he stood up, meeting my eyes. Could have been something else. Someone set this. I'm not saying that. But if I were you, I'd be real careful about who you trust around here. They left as the sun was rising. The barn was a smoking ruin, collapsed in on itself. Everything inside destroyed. Tools, equipment, whatever historical value it might have held. Gone. Lily stood beside me, soot-streaked and exhausted. They're not going to stop. No, they're not. What are we going to do? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. The fear was real now, not abstract. These people had killed before. My parents. Probably my grandmother. 39 other names on that list with red X's beside them. And now Lily and I were in their way. I walked toward the smoking ruins, drawn by something I couldn't explain. The barn had collapsed inward, creating a crater of charred wood and twisted metal. Steam still rose from the debris. The smell of burnt wood and something chemical, like accelerant, hung in the air. Don't get too close. Lily's voice was worried. It's not stable. But something caught my eye. In the center of the collapse, where the floor had given way, I could see edges of something that didn't belong. Concrete. Clean-cut edges, not natural. Get me the shovel from the porch. Lily hesitated, then ran to get it. I approached carefully, testing each step. The burned wood was still hot, but the fire had done something useful. It had revealed what was hidden. I started clearing debris, uncovering more of the concrete structure beneath. It was a door. Another cellar. Built into the barn floor, concealed all these years. The metal handle was scorched but intact. I pulled. It didn't budge at first, then gave way with a groan of protesting hinges. Concrete steps led down into darkness. I used my phone flashlight this time. The chamber below was small, maybe 8 by 8 feet. Concrete walls and floor, completely fireproof. And in the center stood a filing cabinet, gray metal like something from an old office. This was deliberate. My grandmother had built this hiding place specifically to survive disasters. Fire, flood, anything. I pulled open the top drawer. Inside were folders, legal documents, photographs, a cassette player, and several tapes. I pulled out the first folder. The tab read, Sterling Development Evidence. Inside were contracts, dated 2009 through 2012, agreements between Sterling Development and county officials. The language was dense legalese, but the intent was clear. Bribes. Sterling paying officials to approve development permits, waive environmental studies, expedite land acquisitions. One contract was signed by someone named Thomas Brenner, county assessor. Another by Judge Patricia Holbrook. A third by the former police chief, David Walker. A systematic corruption scheme stretching back 15 years. The second folder contained photographs, secret surveillance shots, grainy and distant but clear enough. Richard Kane meeting with the county assessor outside a restaurant. An envelope exchanging hands. More photos of Sterling executives with various officials, always meeting in parking lots, isolated locations, never where they should be conducting official business. The third folder made my heart stop. A list of names, 47 people. Next to each name, an address, property details, water rights documentation, and dates. Next to 39 of those names, someone had drawn a red X and written in careful script, Resolved. I read down the list, recognized some names from Havenwood, others from nearby counties. All of them had owned land with water rights. All of them had refused to sell to Sterling. And 39 of them were dead. Next to each red X was a date and a brief note. Robert Hayes, 2008, equipment accident. William Garrett, 2016, house fire. Sarah Fletcher, 2019, heart attack. My hands were shaking as I found my parents' names. James Bennett, 2012, highway accident. Lisa Bennett, 2012, highway accident. They'd systematically eliminated everyone who stood in their way. At the bottom of the folder was something else, a cassette tape in a clear plastic case, a label in my grandmother's handwriting. For Ember, if anything happens to me. I pulled out the cassette player from the drawer. Old but functional, battery still good. I loaded the tape and pressed play. Static. Then my grandmother's voice, weak and rasping. Sick. Ember, my darling girl. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it. It means the cancer won, or something else did. Either way, I need you to know the truth. All of it. I sat down on the concrete floor, phone light illuminating the cramped space. Lily descended the stairs and sat beside me, listening. That list you're looking at. Those are people who stood up to Sterling Development. People who believed in property rights, in family legacy, in protecting our land and water. 39 of them are dead. The official causes vary. Accidents, illnesses. But I've spent 15 years investigating and I know the truth. Sterling killed them. Sometimes directly, sometimes through hired hands. Always carefully enough to avoid prosecution. Your father, James, was number 23 on that list. He spoke out against Sterling's development plans at a county meeting in July 2012. 2 weeks later, a truck owned by one of Sterling's subsidiaries ran him and your mother off Highway 89. The driver was never identified. The truck was destroyed in a scrapyard before it could be examined. The police report went missing. I know because I paid a private investigator everything I had to look into it. He found enough to convince me, but not enough to convince a court. Sterling has judges in their pocket. Police, county officials. They've built a network of corruption that makes them virtually untouchable. When they started threatening you girls, When they showed me they knew where you went to school, what bus you took, where you played, I knew I had no choice. I couldn't fight them and protect you at the same time. So I made myself the villain in your story. I made everyone believe I'd abandoned you. That way, you weren't valuable to them anymore. You weren't leverage they could use against me. I spent the next 12 years living in hiding, working whatever jobs I could find, saving every penny. I sent letters every week for 5 years, hoping somehow they'd get through. They never did. I realized later that Sterling had contacts in the state system. Someone changing addresses, intercepting mail, making sure we stayed separated. But I kept the letters, all of them, because I needed you to know, someday, that you were never forgotten, never unloved, not for a single second. This evidence I've gathered, it's the result of 15 years of careful work. Documents, photographs, testimony from people too scared to go public. It's not enough to bring Sterling down on its own, but it's a start. And if you're brave enough, if you're willing to fight, it might be enough to get the attention of federal investigators, the FBI, someone outside Sterling's sphere of influence. There was a pause. The sound of my grandmother coughing, struggling to breathe. I'm dying, Ember. The doctor says I have maybe 3 months. I've hidden this evidence where fire can't destroy it, where Sterling can't find it. I've made arrangements for you to inherit the ranch, though you'll also inherit the debt I couldn't pay off. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for so much. But I'm not sorry for choosing to protect you. I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over. If you decide to fight, you need to know what you're up against. Richard Kane is ruthless. He's killed before, and he'll kill again. The people on his payroll will lie, cheat, and destroy evidence to protect him. You'll be facing the full weight of a multi-million-dollar corporation with no regard for human life. But you'll also have something they don't. You'll have the truth. And you'll have the strength of everyone who came before you. Your grandfather, who built this ranch with his bare hands. Your father, who stood up for what he believed in. And me, your grandmother, who loved you enough to become the villain so the real villains would leave you alone. Another long pause, more coughing. I'm so proud of you, Ember. I've watched you from a distance, seen you grow into a strong, brave young woman. You don't know it yet, but you have everything you need to finish what I started. To bring justice for all the people on that list who can't speak for themselves anymore. The choice is yours. You can take the money I saved, walk away, and live a safe life somewhere far from here. I wouldn't blame you. Or you can fight. You can be the voice for the voiceless, the one who finally says, enough. Whatever you choose, know this. You are loved. You have always been loved. And you always will be. The tape ended with a click. Silence filled the small concrete room. Lily was crying. I realized I was too. Tears streaming down my face, cutting tracks through the soot and dirt. My grandmother had spent her final years alone, sick, gathering evidence against the people who destroyed her family. She died knowing she might never get justice, knowing her granddaughters might never understand the sacrifice she'd made. But she'd left us the tools to finish what she started. I stood up, wiping my face, collected all the folders, the tapes, the photographs, everything. What are you going to do? Lily's voice was small. I looked at the evidence in my arms. Documentation of 15 years of systematic corruption and murder. Names, dates, proof. I'm going to make them pay. For Grandma, for Mom and Dad, For all 39 people on this list. Lily stood beside me. How? I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure it out. We climbed back up into the dawn light. The barn smoldered around us, but the evidence had survived. Everything my grandmother had risked her life to preserve was intact. As we walked back toward the house, I heard a car engine. My whole body tensed, expecting Kane and his threats. But it was a county sheriff's vehicle. It pulled up to the house and a man in uniform stepped out. Late 50s, hard face. The kind of cop who'd seen too much and stopped caring somewhere along the way. Amber Bennett? That's me. I'm Sheriff Wade Sullivan. I need you to come with me. Why? He pulled out handcuffs. You're under arrest for arson. You have the right to remain silent. What? Lily stepped forward. She didn't do anything. Multiple witnesses saw you near the barn before the fire started. You had motive, insurance money. You have the right to an attorney. I don't have insurance on the barn. It's not even my property yet. That's for the court to decide. His expression was flat, indifferent. Turn around, please. I looked at Lily, saw the panic in her eyes. Then I looked back at the sheriff, at his perfectly pressed uniform, his expensive watch, the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. This was exactly what my grandmother had warned about. They own the police, the judges, the whole system. I'm not going anywhere. My voice was steady despite the fear racing through me. Sullivan's hand moved toward his weapon. Don't make this difficult, Wade. Caleb's voice cut across the yard. He was walking toward us from the road, moving fast for a man his age. Stop right there. Sullivan's jaw tightened. This doesn't concern you, Caleb. The hell it doesn't. Caleb pulled something from his pocket. A USB drive. I've got copies of every document in Margaret Bennett's files, including the ones showing you took $50,000 from Sterling Development in 2012 to close the investigation into James Bennett's death. The sheriff's face went white. You want to arrest Ember for a fire Sterling obviously set? Fine. But the minute you put those cuffs on her, this drive goes to the FBI field office in Billings, along with testimony from 15 years of watching you cover up Sterling's crimes. Sullivan's hand dropped from his weapon. You're bluffing. Try me. Caleb's expression was granite. I've been documenting Sterling's corruption for 15 years. I've got bank records, photographs, recordings, everything Margaret collected, plus what I've added. You arrest this girl, and I burn it all down. You, Kane, Judge Holbrook, County Assessor Brenner, all of it. The silence stretched. Sullivan looked from Caleb to me, calculations running behind his eyes. Finally, he stepped back. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. Sullivan got in his car and left without another word, tires spitting gravel. I turned to Caleb. You really have all that? I've got enough. He pocketed the USB drive. Your grandmother wasn't the only one collecting evidence all these years. I just never had the guts to use it. But I'm done sitting on the sidelines. They're going to come after us harder now. I know, which is why we need to move fast. He looked at the evidence folders in my arms. We need to get that to someone who can actually do something with it, someone outside Sterling's reach. The FBI? Eventually. But first we need insurance. We need the whole town to know what's in those files. We need to make it public enough that Sterling can't just make us disappear like they did everyone else on that list. How? Caleb smiled grimly. Town meeting, tomorrow night. Every family in Havenwood whose loved ones are on that list deserves to know the truth. And once they know, once it's public, Sterling can't bury it anymore. That gives them 24 hours to stop us, Then we better make sure we're ready when they try. Caleb spent the rest of day 4 making phone calls from the ranch kitchen. I heard fragments through the door. Names I didn't recognize. Quiet, urgent conversations. By late afternoon, people started arriving. Ruth Whitmore came first. She owned the cafe on Main Street, a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much loss. She brought 3 casserole dishes and set them on the counter without a word, then pulled me into a hug that smelled like coffee and cinnamon. Your grandmother was my best friend for 40 years. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. I knew why she left. I knew what they threatened, and I've been waiting 15 years for someone brave enough to finish what she started. I'm not brave. I'm just angry. Good. Anger is fuel. She started unpacking food. You're going to need it. More people came throughout the evening. Daniel Fletcher, whose wife Sarah had died of a supposed heart attack in 2019. Tom Hayes, whose son Robert was killed in an equipment accident in 2008. Martha Klein, who lost her brother to a house fire in 2014. One by one, families who'd lost someone on that list of 39 came to the ranch. They brought food, tools, offers of help. But mostly they brought their grief and their rage, finally given a target after years of swallowing lies about accidents and natural causes. By nightfall, my kitchen was full of people I'd never met who treated me like family. Because in a way, I was. We were all victims of the same machine. Caleb stood at the head of the table, spreading out my grandmother's documents. Tomorrow night, day 5, at 7, Town Hall. Everyone's invited. We lay out everything, all the evidence, all the names. We make it so public that Sterling can't bury it. They'll try to stop us. Daniel Fletcher's voice was rough. They've killed for less. Let them try. Ruth's jaw was set. There's 30 people in this room right now. By tomorrow night, there'll be 100. They can't silence all of us. The meeting lasted until after midnight. Plans were made. Documents were copied and distributed. People volunteered to spread the word, to make sure everyone in Havenwood knew what was happening, to make sure the truth finally came to light. When everyone left, Lily and I were alone in the suddenly quiet house. Are you scared? She curled up on the couch, looking younger than 16. Terrified. But I'm more scared of doing nothing, of letting them win, of dishonoring everyone who died fighting them. She nodded. What do you think Grandma would say if she could see us now? I think she'd tell us to be careful, and then she'd hand us matches to light the fire anyway. That got a small smile. I wish I'd known her. Me too. I looked at the stack of letters still sitting on the kitchen counter. But in a way, we do know her. Every letter, every piece of evidence she collected, every sacrifice she made. That's who she was. Someone who never gave up, even when giving up would have been easier. The next day, day 5, moved with dreamlike slowness. Morning dragged into afternoon. I tried to eat, but couldn't. Tried to rest, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I kept thinking about the town meeting, about standing in front of strangers and accusing one of the most powerful companies in Montana of systematic murder. What if nobody believed me? What if Sterling's influence ran so deep that even with evidence, people chose to look away? The town hall meeting started at 7 sharp on day 5. By 6:30, the parking lot was packed. Cars lined both sides of Main Street. People streamed in through the doors, filling rows of folding chairs. I watched from a window in the back room, stomach churning. Ruth appeared beside me. Half the county is here. Word spread fast. What if they listen and then do nothing? Then we'll know where we stand. But look at those faces, Ember. Really look. I did. Saw the Hayes family taking seats in the front row. The Fletchers, the Kleins. Families who'd lost someone and never gotten real answers. Families who'd been told to accept that accidents happen, that sometimes people just die, that there's nothing to be done. They weren't here to do nothing. They were here for justice. Caleb called the meeting to order. The room fell silent. 200 people, maybe more, every seat filled. People standing along the walls. Thank you all for coming. I know many of you have questions about why we called this meeting. I'm going to let Ember Bennett explain. He gestured to me. I stood on shaking legs and walked to the front of the room. Looked out at a sea of faces. Strangers and neighbors and people connected by loss they didn't fully understand yet. My name is Ember Bennett. My grandmother was Margaret Bennett, who many of you knew. My parents were James and Lisa Bennett, who died in a car accident in 2012. I paused, steadying my voice. Except it wasn't an accident. It was murder. The room erupted. Shocked voices, denials. Caleb raised his hands for quiet. I know that's hard to hear. I know it sounds impossible. But I have evidence. 15 years worth of evidence that my grandmother collected before she died. Evidence of a systematic campaign by Sterling Development Corporation to eliminate anyone who stood in the way of their land acquisition plans. I nodded to Caleb. He dimmed the lights and started a projector. The first image appeared on the wall, the list of 47 names. These are people who owned land with water rights in this county. People who refused to sell to Sterling. 39 of them are now dead. The next slide. Death certificates, accident reports, newspaper clippings, equipment malfunctions, house fires, heart attacks, car accidents. All investigated by police on Sterling's payroll. All closed without real examination. All dismissed as tragedies instead of murders. I went through the evidence piece by piece, showed the contracts proving bribery, the photographs of Kane meeting with officials, the financial records tracking payments, my grandmother's meticulous documentation of 15 years of corruption. With each new slide, the mood in the room shifted. Shock became anger. Denial became rage. When I got to my parents' case, my voice nearly broke. The truck that hit them was owned by Cascade Holdings, a Sterling subsidiary. The driver was never identified. The investigation was closed after 2 months by Sheriff Sullivan, who received $50,000 from Sterling 2 weeks later. I showed them my grandmother's audio testimony, played her weak, dying voice describing what she'd discovered, admitting what she'd sacrificed to keep me and Lily safe. When the tape ended, silence filled the hall. Then someone in the third row stood up, an older woman I didn't recognize. My husband, Marcus, died in a tractor rollover in 2007. They said he was careless, but Marcus had been farming for 40 years. She pulled out a folded paper. He'd received this letter 3 days before he died, an offer from Sterling to buy his land. He'd written "no" across it and sent it back. More people stood, one after another, each with their story, their loss, their questions that had never been answered. My daughter, drowned in the creek behind her house. They said she slipped, but she grew up swimming in that creek. My brother, overdose, they claimed, but he'd been sober for 10 years. My son, Robert Hayes. Tom Hayes's voice shook. He was my only child, and I've spent 15 years believing it was an accident. believing I'd somehow failed to keep him safe.
Now you're telling me he was murdered?
Yes. I met his eyes. And the people responsible are still free, still powerful, still killing anyone who gets in their way. The room exploded into conversation, angry voices, demands for action, calls for justice. Caleb stood. We've made copies of all the evidence. Everyone here can take a set. We're also sending everything to the FBI field office in Billings. But we need your help. We need you to spread the word, to make this so public that Sterling can't bury it. To stand together so they can't pick us off one by one like they did to everyone on that list. I'll stand. Daniel Fletcher rose. For my Sarah. For my son. Tom Hayes. For my brother, Martha Klein. One by one, 19 families stood. Representatives of 19 victims, united for the first time, no longer isolated in their grief. Then others stood, people who hadn't lost anyone on the list, but who were tired of watching their community be destroyed, who were tired of looking the other way, who were ready to fight. By the time everyone was standing, it was nearly unanimous. 200 people on their feet, ready to demand justice. That was when the doors burst open. Sheriff Sullivan stood there with 4 deputies. Behind him, Richard Kane. And behind Kane, a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. This meeting is over, Sullivan's voice carried across the hall. You're all in violation of assembly laws. Disperse immediately or face arrest. Caleb didn't move. We have the right to peaceful assembly. Not when you're spreading libelous accusations against a respected corporation. Kane stepped forward. Mr. Bennett's attorney here has a cease and desist order. Any further dissemination of these slanderous claims will result in lawsuits against every person in this room. The attorney held up paper. Individual lawsuits. We've identified the key participants. You'll all be served within 24 hours. The room wavered. I could feel it. Fear creeping back in. The reality of what fighting a $300 million corporation actually meant. Lawsuits, bankruptcy, retaliation. Then Ruth Whitmore stood. I've lived in this town 61 years. I've watched Sterling squeeze families out. Watched good people die under suspicious circumstances. Watched officials I trusted take bribes and look the other way. Her voice was steel. You want to sue me? Fine, sue me. But I'm not staying quiet anymore. Me neither. Tom Hayes didn't sit. Or me, Daniel Fletcher. One by one, people chose. Chose truth over safety, justice over comfort. Standing up over staying silent. Kane's expression darkened. You're all making a serious mistake. No. I walked down the aisle toward him. The only mistake was thinking you could keep getting away with murder. But that ends tonight. You have no proof. Nothing that would hold up in court. Nothing that can touch me. Maybe not yet. I stopped directly in front of him. But your corporation is about to be under federal investigation. Every official you've bribed is about to have their finances examined. Every death you've covered up is about to be reopened. And every person in this room is a witness to your threats and intimidation. Kane's jaw tightened. You're 18 years old. You have no idea what you've started. Yes, I do. I'm finishing what my grandmother started. I'm giving a voice to 39 people who can't speak for themselves. And I'm making sure that the next time someone tells you no, you can't just have them killed. The room was silent, every eye on Kane, watching him realize that his usual tactics wouldn't work here, that threats and money and legal intimidation weren't going to make this go away. He turned and left. Sullivan and the deputies followed. The attorney stuffed his papers back in his briefcase and retreated. When the doors closed behind them, the hall erupted in applause. But I knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. The meeting ended after 11. People filed out slowly, taking copies of evidence, exchanging phone numbers, making plans to stay in contact. The energy was electric, hopeful. For the first time in years, maybe decades, Havenwood was standing up. Ruth insisted Lily and I stay at her house that night. Too dangerous at the ranch. But I shook my head. If I leave, they win. They get to make me afraid, make me run. I'm staying. Then I'm staying too. Caleb pulled up a chair in the living room. I'll sleep right here. We set up shifts. Caleb would take first watch, I'd take second. We locked every door and window, kept phones charged and within reach. Around 1 in the morning on day 6, my shift started. Caleb was snoring softly in the armchair. Lily was asleep upstairs. The house was dark except for one lamp in the kitchen. I made coffee and sat at the table, looking at my grandmother's letters spread in front of me. I still hadn't opened the last special one. The one marked, "When you find the truth." I opened it now. My darling Ember, if you're reading this, you found everything. You know what happened to your parents. You know why I left. You know about Sterling and the corruption and the deaths. You know the truth. And now you have to decide what to do with it. I can't make that choice for you. But I can tell you what I learned in 15 years of fighting. The truth is a weapon, but it's also a burden. Once you speak it, you can't take it back. Once you shine light on darkness, the darkness will fight back with everything it has. People will call you a liar, a troublemaker. They'll try to discredit you, intimidate you, destroy you, just like they did to everyone else who stood up. So before you go further, ask yourself, are you ready for that fight? Are you strong enough to endure what's coming? Because it will be hard. Harder than anything you've faced, and there's no guarantee you'll win. But here's what I believe, my brave girl. I believe you are exactly strong enough. I believe you have the courage of your father, and the heart of your mother, and the stubbornness of your grandmother. I believe that love is stronger than fear, and truth is stronger than lies, and justice will always be worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible. You were never abandoned. You were protected. You were loved every single day of your life, even when you couldn't feel it. That's what love does. It never quits. And now, it's your turn. Whatever you decide, know that I'm proud of you. Forever and always, Grandma. I folded the letter carefully, set it with the others, wiped tears from my face. Outside, I heard something. A vehicle, more than one. Engines cutting off near the property line. I woke Caleb. He listened. His expression went grim. Call 911, now. I dialed, got the dispatcher. There are vehicles approaching my property. Send someone. Ma'am, we have units 30 minutes away. Can you describe the threat? Before I could answer, I heard glass breaking. The kitchen window. They're inside the house. I dropped the phone, grabbed Lily from upstairs. Caleb was already moving toward the cellar door. The storm cellar. The one place they'd built to survive any disaster. We ran. I could hear footsteps behind us, voices, 3 men, maybe 4, heavy boots on the wooden floors, down the concrete steps. I pulled the heavy door closed behind us just as someone grabbed the handle from the other side. The door held. Barely. Built solid. Meant to withstand tornadoes, but they had time and tools. I heard pounding, metal on metal. They were trying to break the lock. Caleb positioned himself at the bottom of the steps with the sledgehammer. If they get through, they have to come down these stairs. And I'll be waiting. Lily was crying. I pulled her behind me, held her tight. Minutes stretched. The pounding continued. Methodical. Persistent. Eventually, the lock would give. Then I heard something else. Sirens. Multiple vehicles, screeching tires. FBI! Drop your weapons! The pounding stopped. Shouting, running footsteps, chaos above us. We waited. It felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Then a knock on the cellar door. A woman's voice. Ember Bennett? This is Special Agent Sarah Morrison, FBI. You're safe. You can come out now. We climbed the stairs, emerged into a house full of federal agents. 4 men in handcuffs being led outside. Richard Kane among them, face twisted with rage. Agent Morrison was mid-40s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense demeanor. We've been investigating Sterling development for 2 years. Your grandmother's evidence gave us everything we needed for warrants. We've been coordinating with local FBI for months, waiting for the right moment. You knew? Caleb's voice was rough. We suspected. But we needed concrete evidence. And we needed someone brave enough to go public, despite the risks. Morrison looked at me. Your grandmother started this. You finished it. 11 arrests tonight, including Kane, Sheriff Sullivan, and Judge Holbrook. By tomorrow morning, we'll have 20 more. What about the people on that list? The 39 who died? Every case will be reopened, full investigations. I can't promise we'll prove murder in all of them, but we'll try. Morrison's expression softened. Your parents' case is priority 1. The truck driver was found in Nevada last year. He's been waiting for immunity to testify. Now he'll get it, and Kane will face consequences. I couldn't speak, could only nod. The raid lasted until dawn, evidence collected, statements taken. By the time the FBI left, the sun was rising over the ranch. On day 6, Caleb put a hand on my shoulder. You did it. Your grandmother would be so proud. We did it. Everyone who stood up at that meeting. Everyone who refused to be silenced. 5 days later, on a cool morning in late May, I walked to Havenwood Cemetery alone. The grass was wet with dew. Birds sang in the trees overhead. The world felt quiet and new. I found my grandmother's grave easily now. I'd been here once before with Caleb to see where she rested. Simple granite marker. Margaret Ann Bennett, 1948 to 2023. Beloved mother and grandmother. I knelt beside it, setting down the bundle I'd brought. 263 letters tied with the faded blue ribbon. Every one she'd written. Every one that had been sent back. I placed them gently on the grass in front of her headstone. Grandma. My voice was quiet. I found them all. Read every word. Understood everything. The cemetery was silent except for wind in the leaves. You were right. About Sterling. About having to fight. About me being strong enough. I traced my fingers over the carved letters of her name. They arrested Kane yesterday. Sheriff Sullivan took a plea deal. Judge Holbrook resigned. The FBI says it's the biggest corruption case in Montana in 20 years. 39 murders are being reinvestigated. Justice is coming. Finally. A tear rolled down my cheek. The farm is ours now. Really ours. Debt paid. No more threats. Lily started school here last week. She's happy. The community has become our family. And every morning when I wake up in your house, I feel you there. I stood up slowly. Thank you. For every letter. For every sacrifice. For loving me enough to protect me. Even when it meant becoming the villain in my story. For teaching me that love never quits. I looked around the cemetery, saw the other graves, the 39 victims finally getting their justice. I'm going to make this land mean something. Not just water and money, but family, legacy. A place where people stand up for what's right. I touched the headstone one last time. I love you, Grandma. I always will. Then I walked back toward the ranch. The sun was higher now, warming the earth. In the valley below, I could see the white house with its fresh blue roof, the new barn standing straight and proud, smoke rising from the chimney where Lily was making breakfast. Home. Not the home I'd imagined as a child, not perfect or easy, but mine. Ours. Built on sacrifice and truth and the stubborn refusal to give up. I'd spent 18 years believing I was unwanted. But I'd been wrong. Love had been reaching for me all along. Through 263 letters that never reached their destination, but found their way to me anyway. My grandmother had taught me the most important lesson. Love isn't about being present. It's about never giving up. It's about fighting for what matters, even when the fight seems impossible. That's what home means. Not a place you're born, but a place you choose to protect. And I was exactly where I belonged. 3 months later, the ranch had transformed. Every weekend, people from town showed up with tools and willing hands. The barn stood strong again, painted the traditional red. The house gleamed white with blue trim, windows clear, porch solid. 10 acres of wheat swayed in the breeze. A vegetable garden flourished behind the house. Chickens clucked in their coop. 2 goats grazed in the pasture. Lily had found her place at Havenwood High. She came home each day with stories about FFA meetings, friends she'd made, a life she was building. The scared 16-year-old who'd left Portland was gone. In her place was someone confident, rooted. I learned to farm under Caleb's patient instruction. My hands, once soft from city life, had calluses now. My skin was tan. I woke with the sun and fell asleep exhausted and satisfied. Sterling Development Corporation was dissolved. Assets liquidated to pay settlements to victims' families. Kane and 7 others awaited trial for murder. The corruption network was exposed and destroyed. New officials elected. Federal oversight implemented. Havenwood was healing. One evening in late August, Lily and I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky gold and orange. The air smelled like fresh-cut hay and coming autumn. "Do you ever miss Portland?" she asked. "No, not even a little." "Me neither," she smiled. "This feels right. Like we were always supposed to end up here." I thought about the long road that had brought us to this porch. The letters, the evidence, the fight, the community that had stood with us. Maybe we were. The sky deepened to purple. Stars began appearing one by one. In the distance, I could see lights from other farms, our neighbors, our family. I'd found my way home, after 18 years of searching, after 263 letters that proved love never quits. The storm had passed. The truth had won. And I was exactly where I belonged.